As many of you know, our main library is health. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Amanda Eigen. Thanks.
To my immediate left is Becky Gulsvig. Cult hit film Clue recently finished a successful run at the Papermill Playhouse in Melbourne, and her musical adaptation of the 1988 film Mystic Pizza will be performed at the Adirondack Theatre Festival this summer. Please join me in welcoming these three talented women to the 2020. My husband and I were living on the Upper West Side, and I had a 3-year-old, and I was very pregnant, and we were interested in moving, and I had 2 girlfriends that lived on the Upper West Side with me. One just recently moved to West Orange, and then the other shortly thereafter had moved to...
I was living in a commercial loft on the corner of Tiller and Flatbush in Brooklyn. And absolutely were we not supposed to be living there, nor anyone. It's like one of the old had a lease. It was very shady setup, but we lived there for a very, very long time. And then I had a 1-year-old, so cute, and like the house.
Legally Blonde for 2 years, and we ended up giving up our apartment in the city, which we were just renting, in hopes of saving money on tour to buy something. But turns out what you can buy. I'd rather I would have moved to the middle of nowhere in a cabin in the woods. However, I didn't think that would help me commute to the city for acting jobs. So we're very happy that we were pointed in the Maplewood direction by other actors. As you can tell, we sort of follow each other. And it's really nice to not be the only person who does what we do for a living, who has to explain to the teacher why you're out of town for 2 months doing something and why grandma's covering, and then, yeah, come see me in this show. And, you know, it's an abstract lifestyle, but it's so fun, and to be able to live in a town that celebrates that, it's really nice.
Awesome. Well, welcome. How did you all come to pursue careers in the theater, and, you know, what was your exposure to theater growing up? You know who's still at work. I'm going to shake it up. I don't really remember a time in my life when I didn't want to be in the theater. All the classic Disney characters, and I used to talk to them. You know, my mom said that's how I learned how to talk, was talking to these characters. So I think it was always something in me. I don't really gravitated to make the show, make the props and the costumes, and then also be in it. Like, I wanted to do all of the things. To playwriting. So for the last decade or so, my primary focus has been in writing for the stage, but I do still perform every once in a while, and you know, I've got about 5 more years left until I'm an empty nester. And then my hope is that performance and playwriting co-make.
Okay, I'll go. Same thing, always loved theater. I grew up in Minnesota, and so Broadway and New York were very far away and very magical to me. And once I realized that the people back experience to share, and my sort of jump out of the pool was when I was a sophomore in high school. I went to a national call for Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz, when Mickey Rooney. So I was in residence on the Upper West Side. It was run by the Volunteers of America. You had to check in. It was women's only. What a treasure that is, to not think of your job as work. So I love it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
I don't remember a time either. I remember being in plays when I was like 5. It's like an early memory. I remember accidentally wearing a costume on the wrong day, and I remember that like feeling of humiliation, like, oh my God, I'm the only one dressed like a bumblebee. I remember that being like very, but it's always been a part of my life, and then it started to morph into a sort of survival thing too. Like, you could always expect, it was really safe, and for me at least, and home, you know, it always did. I was an actor for a long time, and then I was always a secret playwright, but like my actor ego wouldn't let me like step aside and just be a playwright, because I had a very strong actor ego. But then around, I did a lot of mainstream. I was prepared to really like a Broadway, and it's probably a problem. It's really working out. So I recently wrote, I don't know. It's such an obnoxious tone. Things like there's a theater called PS 122 that did a piece with a dead goat on stage. Like anything that no one would see it. I never really approved of that actually, but a lot of times people walk out and I like it. So,
but how has the pandemic influenced or changed the world of theater, and particularly your relation to your world of theater and creative process, all of that. And I'm going to start this end.
Well, Broadway obviously shut down. I finished on March 1st. I took my family to Harry Potter as a treat, which I'm glad I got to see both parts. Then Broadway shut down, so the whole, like, I'm leaving the show, I'm going to start auditioning again, didn't happen. And we had some family sadness, we had some death in the family, not COVID related, so like, the world just stopped and time stopped and everything, the bottom. And luckily I still love mine and like spending time with them, so that was a good thing. And then at the end of the summer, that first summer, basically just trying to spread the love of theater and get kids interested. There's something to do. So the fact that I can find that connection here has been huge. I love them and I get a little choked up about it. They're awesome kids. It's such a cool town. And to be able to see them, like, it's all good.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's amazing. Sarah?
Well, I had a few shows get canceled, which sucked, but I kind of expected that to happen to the other. I expected that. It wasn't as devastating a blow as I thought it would be. But then I had been working on this book, interviewing my, as I said, the avant-garde sort of pioneers in New York City. And when COVID happened, all their projects got canceled. It's not that you're not working because you don't have a job right now. You can't work right now. It's not going to happen. You know, so that was very depressing for me. So I threw myself into writing this book. So
now what? And a whole bunch of different things happened for me. One is I started to, out of frustration of the kids sort of being bored at teenage sons, I said, well, what if we made a play a day? What if I challenged myself to write a play every single day? And so I started to do a play a day, starring my family. And so, and it was just 60 seconds long, and we would post them on Instagram, and it was ridiculous. And then we went on and on and on. So that was about 2 months of it until they were like, Mom, we're done with this project. And I was like, okay, fine. Those first few months were so dark. Then simultaneously during that time, I was approached by Playscripts, which is a licensing company, and curated piece of high schoolers' perspective on living through a pandemic. And Playscript said, sure. So they commissioned me. I worked on the solo time. I mentioned it already. The balance, and especially the financial piece, supporting your creativity and supporting your careers. So let's talk about that a little bit. Becky, you mentioned that you might have some stories about touring.
Yeah. When you push through and remain an artist as a grown-up, so to speak, there's just a lot of juggling because the schedules are backwards, and once your kid is in school, as a theater person, your hours do not match theirs at all. I mean, when my daughter was little, it worked out great because, you know, I was with her all day. She didn't have preschool yet, or maybe she did for 2 hours. And then about the time she'd be getting ready for bed anyway, I'd go do my show. So I wasn't missing out on anything. She came on tour with us when I was 4 for a year, so she hit every children's museum, every zoo. It was awesome. But then we came back for kindergarten, which was super important to me that we be back. But that being said, I was gone on the weekends, and it was her first year of school, so there were a lot of tears at the door on Saturday before the matinee as I would leave, which is heartbreaking when you're trying to do your best to not only, you know, take care of your soul and your art, but also take care of your family. So I know any parent that has to leave their kid anywhere has those moments of, don't go, from their kid, and you're like, I'm hurting them, it's over. But she's okay so far. But yeah, then when they're in school, you know, you can't just take whatever job you want if you don't have the childcare. I mean, any parent understands the childcare is the name of the game. And I did end up taking another tour where my family couldn't go with me, and that was Come From Away, because I just so very much believe in that story. If you're not familiar, it's about a small island of Gander, Newfoundland. The island, Gander is the town, and they take care of 38 planes full of people on 9/11 when they had to clear the airspace. And they doubled the size of their town and took care of strangers for 5 days. And I'm married to a Canadian, he's from Ontario, but still. And that was 9/11, so I know how scary that time was. And to to just be able to do what I love in the theater, and tell a story that was so hopeful in the face of tragedy, was really important to me. And I had that moment in the kitchen with my husband where I was like, I think I'm gonna book this. Are you okay if we make this happen? Because he was not gonna quit another job for me. Because he'd already sold t-shirt on Beverly Blonde and watched Kids Along the Beautiful tour. And he was like, yeah, but we can't go. You have to go on your own. And so we got an au pair for the year. And I flew home my days off on the red eye from LA and would take her to school and then fly back and take a nap and do the show on Tuesday. And it's not restful, but it's the choice you make. And I'm so happy to make the exhausting choices to do all the good things. And I think in the long run, it's showing my kid that she can do what she wants as long as she does her best and keeps her priorities in line. And sometimes that is a struggle, and it means you miss some stuff. But I believe in doing that extra work. But it is a juggle. I mean, to be a parent and work any job is a juggle. But it's nice, again, to live in a town where you're not the only person that's juggling a lot of things. Not that other towns don't have juggling parents. We all do. But
We have the most.
the most. We're winning.
I think there's a major disconnect in the American theater and childcare. I don't understand why they act like only lawyers and doctors are allowed to have children. It really is upsetting when you even ask for a childcare line in the budget. They're like, oh, well, we can do this, we can do cups for the water thing, but we can't, it's like it's been an ongoing thing for me. I feel very strongly that there should be someone there all the time. There's a company called Maplewood who always put in a line for a babysitter, no matter where they were. They bring them or whoever it was, because kids would come. And as a self-producing artist, I bring my kids to everything. I have to, because I work with my husband, which is so it's sort of this family thing, and my kids come to rehearsal, and it's like totally normal for them. I don't know. Sometimes when they were really little, it was difficult because they'd run around and act crazy, and actors don't like that. But now they're older and they watch and they're there, and it's not weird for them. And I don't know. Before I went on my childcare rant, what was the original question?
Juggling.
Oh yeah. The only thing I can do is bring them when I have to. I mean, that's all I can really do. And when we have a space, they're there. And if I'm acting as just playwright for like an outside production, that's easy because my husband can watch them. But when we're all working together, it's sort of like this Partridge Family thing, I don't love it, but it's kind of what I have to do. Unless there's a revolution, like Joanna Colitis, who's the director, wanted to shape the public theater in the 80s to be a community for families, like to encourage artists to have kids, and this idea that artists can't have kids, and that it's one or the other. It's all such BS. So I just think that is something that really needs to be fixed in American theater. So that's my rant.
I applaud. Having children for me totally transformed my career path. I really thought I was just going to be an actress. That was my primary dream. I always loved writing, but it felt secondary to me. And I was really lucky to move to New York and be working as an actress. And when I got pregnant, I was in a play, and I asked for maternity leave, and I was like, all I need are a couple of months at the end of my pregnancy, a couple of months after the baby's born, and I'll be right back in the show. And they granted that to me, and that baby was born, and I was shocked to learn about myself that I loved something more than the theater, which was when I became a parent, because I didn't want to go back to 8 shows a week, and if that was true about me, I didn't understand who I was. So that for me, mom, and I couldn't figure out how to be in what I knew of the hours of the theater, and I just couldn't figure it out. And so I decided to scrap the Broadway dreams for a second and just go back to my roots in improv comedy and sketch comedy and just take class, just meaning, I guess. And I had this teacher who was like, nobody's writing this up. I was writing all about being a young mom, like comedy sketch about young. My older son was a couple of years old. I was working on what I thought was maybe turned into my first professional show that I wrote that ended up being produced in New York, and that then opened up a door into playwriting, where I was working. I mean, he's still my husband now, but at the time he was working a job that just, if we were both working the hours that we would have been working, neither one of us would have been home with the kids, and that wasn't something that I wanted. So anyway, I shifted my focus and it ended up being this huge blessing in disguise because I love this new chapter of my career. And I still feel connected to my performing roots. And you had asked earlier, Amanda, about ways in which artists support themselves. So I continue to have a voiceover career. I have a voiceover booth in my house. And, you know, when COVID hit and plays weren't running, I was still able to record audiobooks every day in my home. And that was a huge gift and continues to be a gift. So, yeah, I think we all kind of scrap together the things that we can kind of do or are good at that can allow us to support this drive that we have to be artists and make it work within our family structure.
It's interesting because what I'm hearing is that there's this consistency, but there's also this, you really have to be able to shift and move, and not just because of the pandemic, but just the nature of the business, which I know from really recognize that as a piece of it, just that there's always a shift and a movement to it.
It did sort of, help is maybe the wrong word, but it wasn't as difficult to myself, and I had this conversation with a lot of other artist friends that are used to losing their jobs all the time. Their shows close, things get canceled, they are constantly auditioning, constantly getting turned down. So the idea that there wasn't going to be work for a while wasn't completely foreign. The thing that was new was that there was no FOMO, because nobody was working.
That was kind of cool.
It was kind of cool for a minute, sad as a whole, but it definitely saved you from wearing out those emotions. You could put your energy elsewhere because nobody was getting to do it.
It's an even playing field, you know? It was like everybody was an artist stuck at home.
So that actually leads nicely into my next question, which is that something that's always fascinated me in Maplewood. It's such a competitive field, but it's also such a close and supportive community. And how do you support each other when you're actually competing with one another?
No, I think it's rare that you'd meet any of us around town that are in direct competition, and hopefully you get to the healthy space where you can be happy for someone when they get it and you don't, and then you get something, you hope they'll be happy for you. A little more grown approach than the 20-year-old, I'm going to cut you and get this part, you know?
Yeah.
But for me, it's the day-to-day stuff, like the fact that Sandy came and talked to my theater class one day, and we got to talk about that. The fact that I emailed her once, and I was like, listen, I have to do a Russian Jewish accent for this audition, and I'm going to embarrass myself. Will you help me? And she helped me with those little, like, nut bolts, or like, I helped her with some readings and things, like, this is what is so valuable to me, awesome people.
I think Maplewood is unique in that way. I think that the artistic community in Maplewood absolutely supports and loves each other and understands that there's enough success for everybody to go around. It doesn't feel like there is not really a competitive vibe in that way. It's something about the community and neighborhood, like Becky's saying, that we're a community, we want each other to succeed, because somebody else, your neighbor's success only means that yours is coming down the pipe, you know? So, I don't know, I think it does feel easier to support each other when you have
Comparison fair, which I used to suffer from. I'd be like, how did I get that? Like, it is so toxic, flowing through me, you know? When I was as I've become an adult, I've forced that away. It's such a toxic thing. But there was Neil Patrick Harris told this story in an interview. It was like being is you alone standing on the shore, and you swim out into the ocean, and a wave, you catch a wave, and you're surfing the wave, and then you're at the top of the world, and then the wave comes down, and you go back to the shore, and you just wait for the next wave. First is doing on their wave right now, and they come back to the shore. So that helped me a lot.
I think too, like for me, I feel like the success that I have found as a writer is because I live in Maplewood. And if it's not going to sound good on them, it needs to be rewritten. Like there's no like, oh, a different actor might do it better. Like no, you've got the best person ever trying this material. If it doesn't work, then you know you got to fix it. It's an enormous advantage that I do not take for granted, and I feel incredibly fortunate to be in this community of incredibly talented, generous performers who are willing to say, like, yeah, show up from your living room, I'll read your new scene, or what's your crazy idea? Yeah, I'll pretend to be whatever. You know, like that is something that I think a lot of writers don't have, and that's something that this community in Maplewood affords to me. And also the audiences here are really sophisticated. Like, I've had multiple shows that have had their first readings either here on the stage or at SoPAC or somewhere in the Maplewood, South Orange lobby, in the barn. And Maplewood, South Orange audiences come out and they tell me what they think. They write critiques, they write feedback, they stay for talkbacks. That is unbelievably valuable as somebody who's writing for the commercial theater to say like, okay, well, I have these really smart neighbors who are coming and giving their time and energy and telling me what's what. I think without the support of this community, I don't think I would have the career that I have right now as a writer, because I made that shift after I moved here, and I think it's because of being able to do that. The community, the artists, all of it. So I think that was a huge part of it.
So where do you guys get your ideas? What inspires you? What draws you in? And I'd like to start with Sara, because I want to hear more about like the rat, the dead rat.
That's a background concept. Your ideas from. I've sort of attributed playwriting to like learning. Sorry, I'll talk directly into the microphone. Learning a new language every time. Like if I'm going to learn Japanese, I got to start at the very basic and learn how this particular play functions. Images on anything around. Is this a sort of non-linear solo piece that spirals out of control? You kind of have to learn the language of each play. It was a play called Casablanca Box, which we wrote because we thought, let's get the movie that everybody knows, and we'll do the other side of the filming. So that was our original concept. We were like, we're going to shoot Casablanca, the actual shooting in 1942, but we're going to shoot it, we're going to stage it the moments before every scene, and the moments after every scene. We're not going to show you the famous scene, because that's what you want. We kind of want to F with you, you know, that's kind of that's also an avant-garde tenet. Just mess with the audience as much as you can. But, so that, it came from original being like, well, what really, this movie's so beautiful, so mythic, and what really happened? And we heard it was such a chaotic film shootings during World War II. So we were like, let's make the most dramatic backstage, noises off kind of scenario that we can. It was an amazing, fun show. It took years of my life to make that show, because it was so difficult. We had 17 equity actors, all of whom we had to pay their health insurance. So that was a lot. But we had, we had a theater producing it, co-producing it. So yeah, an idea comes from a piece comes from a kernel of an idea that seems dopey at first, and then we're like, let's actually follow through with this idea. And we recently, the last show we did right before COVID was, we told the story of Marlon Brando's life through his movies. That sounds kind of silly, but it was really dark and scary because his life was kind of a dumpster fire of life. So we did it through this interview that he gave to Truman Capote. We read an interview, it's a 1957 interview. We read an interview, what if we stage this only using scenes? Stage interview only using scenes from Marlon Brando's movies. So that was our last show we did in 2019. I'm so glad we were able to do that show right before the pandemic. But it came from just being like, well, what's the next thing we're going to do? Who does everybody know? They don't know Brando. What's something weird and effed up we can do with Brando, you know? So it kind of just comes from like a dumb idea that my husband and I get, and then we're like, it's dumb. People might know what we're talking about. We'll just follow through with it. And that's how it usually happens.
Before I want to come right back to that question, since you mentioned Casablanca Box, one thing that I noticed when I was when I was watching your clips, was that you join the past and the present with technology.
Yeah. That's the part that takes years off your life, the technology. It was influenced by this Wooster Group idea, but with Wooster they would put real plugged-in television sets on stage, and you could see the gear, you could see the wires on stage, and you could see the lighting instruments. We were like, what if we just did it with light? What if we just had a projector, well, not a projector, sometimes 10 projectors around the room, and you don't see the technology, all you see is the image, and we would catch it on a piece of paper, or we would catch it on someone's hand, or we would catch it, and so it blows up the concept of, the problem is that you can't, it's a dance, and if you miss catching an image, the whole scene collapses like a domino, you know, so it takes a huge choreography, a lot of aggravation from actors, but once they get the dance, it's awesome and fun. So that's sort of our aesthetic, is tech, but not necessarily seeing the wires, you know?
Thank you. Okay, so back to what inspires you, what moves you to, where do you get your ideas?
Gosh, I get inspired by literally anything. You know, Nora Ephron's mother was famous for saying everything is copy, and I have that huge, taped up to our bulletin board in the kitchen, and I firmly believe it. I think an idea can come from anywhere. I tend to be very character dialogue driven, so like in a Neil Simon-esque kind of a way, like I can hear a line of dialogue and think like, oh, that's got to be somewhere, like where would that fit, and build a world around that. Or something funny will happen to me, or something funny will happen to a friend, or it can come to me from anywhere. Usually I have this little patch of hairs on the back of my neck, and as soon as it stands up, I'm like, oh, okay. And I write it down, and then I know, like, whether that's going to be a whole play or a line in something one day or whatever, I keep a running tab of things that I just feel like I could fit them onto a stage somehow. And usually they'll find their way eventually. So, yeah, anywhere is my answer.
And Becky, as a performer, and a triple threat at that, how do you stay creative as a performer, and how do you bring your ideas in when you're, to a degree, you're reliant on the lyricist, the playwright, you're relying on other people to produce your art, so how does...
Yeah, as an actor, you don't have as much creative control. It's a real skill to develop the ability to know what you can bring and bring it, and then get over the fact you can't control everything. That's hard. I try to bring my best self. I try to bring my real life experiences, which luckily you just collect so many more experiences as you get older. Rated B, like seeing it and auditioning to be like the offstage cover and getting great feedback, and who knows what they really said, but what I was told was like, you were great, you're just a little young. And I know what that is, that's, you just need. So I love that I've been able to gather experience and knowledge and bring myself to work as an artist. At an age where you just need to be able to control some stuff, not just what your kid eats for breakfast, but something you do with the creativity that I need to watch them do it. And I find when you hang out with the little ones, the younger you stay, to have, multiple fires going and not just be reliant on someone saying I can do what I do well for a living and giving me the chance, like to be able to do stuff for myself, has been a nice window that has opened because of the pandemic, and I can bring so many of those experiences now as an artist, and just a little more like can-do spirit, and that's just, it's reassuring to find, you have more legs.
And kids don't question, like kids will come up with a crazy idea and you're like, talk more about that, and they don't suddenly go like, this is never going to get a grant, this is pointless, this is a waste of time. They go through with a whole crazy idea, and then they finish and they're confident. I love some of that confidence.
Oh yeah, them seizing ownership is the best.
They don't have an editor in their head yet.
They don't. I left class a little early. I had someone cover the end, and the girl was trying on her mermaid skirt. And so we were practicing how she could get her mermaid skirt on while we flashed the lights so nobody noticed. And then the fact that she couldn't walk downstairs, so we had to figure out how I could lift her off the stage with no one looking. And that guy saying, they're just willing to try stuff, and that's the point. If you can't try stuff when you're a kid, when are you supposed to try stuff? So it's just been reassuring to sort of like get over myself in that own way too, and just play. I was doing a tour, and I was having a very miserable time with my co-star, and like really, really bad, worst experience ever. And his cover was on one day, and I was like, oh man, I just had a really great day, like I want to say thank you. He's like, well, it is called a play. And I was like, oh, it's supposed to be fun, it's a play. We have to play, even if we're being paid. Yeah. It's imperative that we play. So I've just loved delving into that side of myself, which, at one point was very square, follow the rules, and now I'm very square, follow the rules with a lot more fun.
So I had this question for Sandy, but I think you could all probably answer it as well. But you lean towards comedy. You talked about comedy, and why is funny important? How did comedy come to be your focus?
So I grew up in a house with a really funny dad, and other kids would listen to music, and I was listening to Jackie Mason. We had, Mel Brooks albums would play like while dinner was being prepared in my home. We had comedy albums in the car, like that. It was the soundtrack of my youth were comedy albums. And I grew up in Chicago, where improv and sketch rule. So I grew up attending improv classes and sketch comedy classes all the way through college, because I also went to college in Chicago. So it was just sort of there, and what I loved. I mean, I watched the Carol Burnett show religiously. It was like, that was the thing. I wanted to be Carol Burnett. I have all this thing of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I just said Carol Burnett. Like that was it. That was it for me. And it remained so. And then as I grew, and I was able to read more and learn more and see more, then my taste took Burnett for me. Like that is kind of the fabric of my youth and what I was most interested in. And Carol Burnett said that comedy equals tragedy plus time. And my dad got really sick when I was 17 years old, and it was really difficult, and he had a really horrible chronic illness for over 20 years that transformed him physically and mentally, and it was really, really horrible for our family. And he watched Seinfeld every single day, and the way that comedy wove into what was sort of this unexpected, horrible time in my life, it meant something to me. And sometimes performing arts can feel like a narcissistic pursuit, because you have to be so singularly focused on what you are doing before you have an opportunity to share. There is no greater, more satisfying feeling for me, what the gift that I like, that's like what I'm here to do. It feels like I'm certain of that. So to me, comedy affords me the ability to provide that gift, and really learning it and honing it and treating it like important, like a craft to really understand and get better at feels really gratifying to me in my adulthood, way more than I thought. I think initially I just gravitated towards it because I liked it, and now it feels more important, especially after this pandemic. And being able to share Clue, which is a comedy, with audiences post-pandemic has been unbelievable. The responses of kids, lots and lots of high schools are doing this play now, and so I get all these, messages on Instagram or whatever, it makes me feel so happy that there's something that I helped to create that is making so many people happy. That feels like, I don't know, feels huge. So that's a long answer to how was comedy factor, but yeah, that's the answer.
But I see you guys nodding, and we're approaching our last.
It feels like this wave, even if the audience is like small, it's just like, my agent used to call it, because I would get all excited about it, she'd go, don't get too crazy, it's sort of like crack. And I remember her telling me, like, chill on it, but it really is like, oh, it feels so good.
That shared experience, that's the joy of theater, that you can sit, you can all laugh together at the same thing, and you're like, oh, like that is such a thing. When you're sitting by yourself in front of the TV, it's not as much fun. I'm sorry, TV is amazing, I watch a lot of it when I'm on the treadmill or doing laundry. But being able to share that experience is the joy of theater. So having that back, whether it's laughing or crying, or then just like being so soaked into the story, or seeing kids get into their story that they made up, or like singing their hearts out so much they're almost screaming. It's that shared experience that I'm so happy to have back, and I value that so much more now after not being able to do that, to know that we just have to keep putting good out into the world and just keep sharing experiences. It's cheesy and it's basic, but it is so important, and I don't take it for granted, especially, now.
I think too, as a writer who, mostly writes comedy before the pandemic, this isn't, I'm not going to say this exactly right, but there was this sort of sense that like comedy was second to like the real playwright who writes something dramatic, and now that energy has shifted a bit. The audiences are hungry to go into a theater and laugh, and you know, I have shows that I've been working on for a long time that are now finding their legs in a new way because audiences are asking theaters, please just produce, I just want to come laugh for a night. And so I think it's exciting to be a living playwright now. I mean, clearly, it's nice to be a living playwright. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I mean, to be in a position to be able to answer to right now, to this time, and say like, all right, well, I got a funny idea. I can get a guy to slip on a banana peel for you in, you know, 3 seconds flat. That feels nice to see globally the community say like, yes, we'd like to laugh now, please. So.
Well, I could sit here and talk with you guys all night long. I've just had a blast, and I just want to thank you so much for joining us here at the opening of the 2022 Ideas Festival. I do want to close just by asking each of you to touch on what's next. I mentioned what you guys have been down the pipe in my intro, but just brag away. Go ahead, Sarah. You want to start?
Sure. Rather than do a play in 2021, which was wise, my company and I filmed a piece called Mendacity, where we stole Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams. Don't ask about how we got the rights, we didn't even bother. We staged it with Lindsey Graham in the lead as the Liz Taylor role, and we had him do the role. And we, instead of turning it into a show, we actually filmed it as this is a piece that the New Jersey state government funded, so that we filmed it as a film. We made a film in a space that we've used called the Connolly Theater on East 4th Street. And it's the most, watching it as an ordeal. It's really in your face. The Lindsey Graham connection is absolutely insane. So we filmed this movie, and we just started editing it with our editor and composing music for it with David Van Teegen, who's an amazing composer. So that's what I'm working on right now. It should be like, but we made it a film because we didn't want to perform it for no one, so.
Sandy, go ahead.
Sure. So I think you mentioned that I've done the adaptation for Mystic Pizza, which was a 1980s rom-com. So we premiered that in this 24,000 square foot tent outside last summer in Maine. And this summer we're going to do a stage reading of it actually now in New York City, and then it's going to launch some regional productions all over, and then hopefully a tour. So that's coming up. And then I have an original play called The Cottage that actually we first did a reading of at SOPAC, you know, I think in 2014 maybe. And Jason Alexander from Seinfeld is directing it, and it's supposed to come to Broadway next spring, so that's really exciting. And I wrote a film, my first feature film, that is going to be produced and starts shooting in Puerto Rico in the fall. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, those are my 3 main things at the moment, so that's exciting.
Sarah, you did mention your book earlier, but just you have a book coming out.
I begged them to make it come out today so I could come here not empty-handed, and they were like, we can't, I'm sorry. And that was the final word.
We will look for your book.
I, as you mentioned, am going back into the Broadway show of Come From Away for 2 months, which I'm so excited about. I mean, as you know, I love it very much. So you can see me at the show in Felt. I will be absent 2 days, which I will put on my Instagram because I'm attending my daughter's birthday and her school play. But other than that, I will be there every show. And in the meantime, between and after that, I will be playing with all of the children in town. We will be crafting scenes and songs and dances, and I've got some summer camps planned. We are up at St. George's in their awesome parish hall, which gives us a lot of space to run around and create and go craft-tastic and let imaginations go wild. So I'm just looking forward to finding a very happy balance between now the 2 worlds that I've happily got going and living.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your stories with us and for joining us here at the Ideas Festival. We're very, very lucky to have you here and to have you here in our community. So thank you.
Thank you.